Prognosis EMR, creating input categories. In this video, we're going to discuss categories and organ systems, which is the first tier in the hierarchy of template design. We can analogize it like the chapters in a book. Categories or organ systems allow you to group together the points that will be documented on the template during an encounter. These may be individual to a specific template, or they can be universal, meaning they can be added to multiple templates within the category. With regards to your review of systems and physical exam organ systems, you're able to create custom categories and assign the default E&M so that you get appropriate credit for them. In addition, the organ system or category is what determines the sequence your details are displayed in the generated output, such as your progress notes and op notes. So I'm logged in here to Prognosis as an administrator, and what we're talking about here under our settings configuration menu is down here across the bottom under input elements, tests, and templates. And for each of the clinical classifications, vitals, HPI, ROS, etc., we're concerned with this very top line. And as you notice here, most of these are labeled as category, with the exception of ROS and physical, they're called organ systems, and for lab and radiology, they're called test category. This is actually a customizable label. If you would like to rename them locally, you certainly can do that. Throughout this series, we use the analogy of writing a book. Now in this analogy, the encounter is the patient's story for the day, and the input template serves as the book. Now in order to compose the book, you need the pages, and the pages in this example would be the elements or the bullets, which are covered in a separate video. And those pages are of course organized by the chapters, which is what we're looking at here, the category or organ system. And we'll see how this all comes together in our creating input template videos. So to get an idea of what we're speaking about, down here across the bottom, we're going to just take a real quick look at each of these different classifications. For example, if we look here under our social history categories, we see abuse history, diet history, drugs, alcohol, tobacco, education, employment, and so on. Those are the different categories of the questions that will be asked of the patient as regards their social history. So you can organize all of the different components for each category. If we look under vitals, you might organize them adult, children, or just a broad category that you apply across the board. Maybe there's special circumstances such as an e-lab interface that requires certain vital signs to be sent electronically. Now as we get to these other categories, there's some more specific criteria that locally you may decide how you want to use them. We mentioned one of our bullet points up above that as you create these categories, they could be specific or they could be universal, meaning they could apply across the board. So we can see that, for instance, here if we go into our HPI. You might want to have a generic one simply called pain details, where you put your pain scores. And then regardless of if it is a back pain, a neck pain, an extremity pain, you're always going to use the same scale. So instead of creating the category each time for each anatomical part, you create it once and then you apply it to all of the templates. But then again, maybe you do have some specific issues. It's going to vary based upon your specialty. Family practice, internal medicine, you're going to have a wide variety of categories that may be complaint specific, such as bug bite, foreign body, broken bone, or shortness of breath. Specialists may be very specific to the diagnoses you're treating. Maybe you've already diagnosed the patient as having asthma or hypertension. It's very subjective based on how you want to organize your documentation. Now when it comes to the review of systems and physical, they're a little more defined based upon anatomical systems such as allergic immunologic, cardiovascular, endocrine, musculoskeletal, and so on. Now specialty and clinic forms are similar to HPI in that they're going to be very specifically locally defined. For instance, maybe you are family practice or internal medicine and you do general screenings. So you may have a genetic screening, general health screening, or very specific based on what you are screening for, diabetes or PSA. Maybe you're urgent care and you do splinting, so you want it broken out by the type of splint. Or maybe you're a dermatologist or a surgeon and you do different biopsies. Again, it's depending upon your local workflows if you make it generalized or specific. So now we're going to learn how to add a new category or organ system. And this process is the same for any of these classifications down here at the bottom. So I'm not going to look at each one individually. For example, I'm just going to open up my HPI. Now, it is a good rule of thumb that you search so that you don't have a lot of duplications. So for instance, maybe I want to create a new one called sore throat. So I'm going to search and see if I have one called sore throat, and I don't. Now, that is a common complaint, so it may be out there under a different variation or a different name. Maybe it's under laryngitis. Well, you may not want to call it specifically laryngitis because you haven't made the diagnosis yet, and you're not an ear, nose, throat specialist. So you want to go ahead and create one called mouth pain. So down here at the bottom, I'm just going to click the Add New button. And there's 3 fields. The name is free text, and it can be whatever you want to call it, whether it's going to be a symptom, an ailment, an actual diagnosis, procedure, totally up to your discretion. So I'm simply going to type in sore throat. Now, this code typically will have a prefix that indicates the classification. For instance, here under HPI, it usually starts with an HP and then a unique number behind it. It does not have to follow that rule, however. It is simply a 10-digit alphanumeric field that must be unique in order to save the record in the database. I'm just going to go ahead and type in sore throat. Now, your sequence will always default to 1000 by the system. We're going to get into sequence in another video, but that does have a benefit to you when it comes to organizing the output on your progress note and your operative notes. So I'm just going to go ahead and click Save. Now again, that's going to be the same process across the board except for review of systems and physical exam. I am going to go ahead and open up the organ system category for review of systems. Within the National E&M guidelines, there are 14 standard organ systems that are recognized universally. And those are preloaded in your database, and each E&M system is numbered 1 through 14 and interfaces into the Encounter E&M calculator within Prognosis. Sometimes you may want to adapt the nomenclature, however, or create your own local organ system. For instance, instead of cardiovascular, maybe you would rather call it heart and lung, or heart only and lung only, based on how you like to separate your documentation. But again, you want to get the proper credit towards your E&M. So when you add new, you're also going to assign the E&M number. Now I'm going to go ahead and open up cardiovascular since that is a standard one. And you'll see here that it's already assigned E&M system number 4. And again, if we look at any of the other standard ones, constitutional, it says E&M system number 1, endocrine, E&M system number 12, and so on. So if you do want to add that new category, the E&M system number is a required field. Now, if you put 0, you will be able to save your new organ system, but it will not count toward a review of system or physical exam bullet on your E&M screen. But if you do want to get credit for it, again, in that example of cardiovascular, which was number 4, but we wanted to create one and call it heart and lungs, the same rules we just talked about apply for those first 3 fields, but then for our E&M system number, we would put 4. And then in our E&M calculator, it would count that as the cardiovascular system. So in review, the category or organ system serves as the first tier in template design, which groups together the different documentation points on an input template. These categories can be individual or shared amongst multiple input templates. With regards to review of systems and physical, this will help determine the default E&M number if you create custom organ systems, and ultimately it will also determine the sequence that your details are displayed in your generated output. Please remember to watch the Creating Input Template videos for each classification for more details.